For decades, fans of rock and pop music have been fascinated by the stories behind the music legends they love. And few relationships have sparked as much curiosity as the one between Cliff Richard and George Harrison, two icons of British music. Their paths crossed in a way that left an indelible mark on both their lives, but until now, much of the story remained untold. At 85, Cliff Richard is finally opening up, sharing insights and experiences that shed new light on his connection with the legendary Beatles. The revelation isn't just about friendship or professional admiration. It's about the truth behind the rumors, speculation, and countless headlines that surrounded their interactions over the years. Cliff has always been known for his charm, wit, and discretion. But the passage of time has given him perspective, allowing him to reflect honestly on what George Harrison meant to him both personally and professionally. Fans have long wondered about the nature of their bond. Were they collaborators, rivals, or simply two giants of music who respected each other from afar? Cliff's candid reflections finally offer answers. What makes this story compelling is not just the fame of the two men, but the humanity behind the headlines. Cliff's memories reveal moments of humor, insight, and even tension, painting a picture of George Harrison that few have seen. It's a glimpse into the complexities of life at the top of the music world, where success, talent, and personality collide in ways that are both inspiring and revealing. At 85, Cliff Richard is not just recounting old anecdotes, he's giving fans a rare window into a personal truth that has remained private for decades. It's a story of music, friendship, and honesty. And it reminds us that even legends have relationships, struggles, and stories that are worth telling long after the spotlight fades. Cliff Richard has long been a towering figure in British music, a pop icon whose career has spanned more than 6 decades. Known for his charm, smooth voice, and enduring appeal, he has witnessed the evolution of modern music firsthand. But few stories from his life have captivated fans as much as his encounters with George Harrison, the quiet Beatle whose influence on rock music is legendary. For years, speculation swirled about the nature of their relationship. Were they simply acquaintances, collaborators, or something more nuanced? At 85, Cliff Richard has decided it's time to finally set the record straight. Their paths first crossed during the height of the 1960s music explosion in England, a period when the country was producing a wave of talent that would soon dominate the global charts. Cliff, already established and adored by fans, had earned a reputation for professionalism and dedication, while George Harrison, a member of the Beatles, was emerging as a creative force whose songwriting and guitar skills were quietly redefining the sound of rock music. Both men were young, ambitious, and navigating a world that demanded constant innovation. Yet, despite their differing trajectories, there was an immediate recognition of mutual talent and respect. According to Cliff, their first interactions were marked by curiosity and admiration. He recalls a moment backstage at a concert where George approached him, guitar in hand, and shared thoughts on music, harmony, and the evolving British sound. It wasn't just small talk, Cliff explains. George had ideas, opinions, and a perspective that made you stop and listen. I realized then that he was not just a talented musician. He was an artist in the truest sense. This first encounter, simple as it seemed, laid the groundwork for a complicated yet intriguing relationship that would span decades, filled with collaboration, observation, and unspoken camaraderie. Over the years, Cliff and George crossed paths at award shows, recording studios, and private gatherings. Each meeting was brief but impactful, offering glimpses into each other's worlds. Cliff admired George's humility despite his fame, and George seemed genuinely interested in Cliff's career longevity and approach to connecting with audiences. Yet, their relationship was never simple. Rumors swirled in the press, fans speculated endlessly, and some critics even suggested rivalry. Cliff has now clarified that most of these assumptions were far from the truth. Behind the headlines, there was mutual respect, occasional playful banter, and a shared understanding of what it meant to live in the public eye, while pursuing a life devoted to music. Closes with Cliff reflecting on the significance of George Harrison in his life. Beyond music, George represented a standard of integrity, creativity, and thoughtfulness that inspired Cliff both personally and professionally. The admiration was never about competition, it was about recognizing another artist whose vision matched his own dedication to craft. As Cliff prepares to reveal the deeper truths about their relationship, fans are offered the rare chance to see the Beatle through the eyes of a contemporary who not only witnessed his genius, but experienced it firsthand. Their story, filled with music, respect, and decades of shared history, is finally being told. And as Cliff turns 85, he makes it clear that some truths are too important to keep private, especially those that celebrate the human side of legends. For decades, fans and tabloids alike speculated about the dynamic between Cliff Richard and George Harrison. Were they close friends? Friendly rivals? Or simply two stars whose paths occasionally crossed in the whirlwind of 1960s British music? Cliff Richard now reveals that the truth is far more nuanced than the rumor suggested, offering insight into a relationship built on respect, admiration, and occasional tension but never malice. Cliff recalls the early years when both he and George were navigating sudden fame. In those days, the music industry was a pressure cooker of expectations, media scrutiny, and relentless touring schedules. While the Beatles' meteoric rise often dominated the headlines, Cliff carved out his own niche, becoming an icon in his own right. Despite differing public profiles, the two artists maintained a mutual awareness of each other's work. "We were always aware of each other," Cliff says. "But there was no need for rivalry. We were doing what we loved and we respected each other for it." One notable moment that Cliff shares is their collaboration at a private charity event. George had a reputation for his gentle humor and quiet confidence, and Cliff was struck by how effortlessly George could command a room without needing to dominate it. George had this way of observing, listening, and then contributing something meaningful, Cliff explains. It wasn't showy. It was genuine. And it left a mark. That evening, though brief, revealed to Cliff the depth of George's creativity and the sincerity that often went unnoticed by the public. Cliff also addresses some of the misconceptions that have persisted for decades. Rumors suggested tension over professional competition, differences in style, and even personal disagreements. Cliff clarifies that much of this was fueled by media speculation rather than reality. "George and I had our moments like anyone else, but there was no animosity," he emphasizes. "We shared the same passion for music, and that connection was stronger than any headline or rumor." What made their relationship remarkable, according to Cliff, was the balance of admiration and honest critique. George respected Cliff's professionalism and stage presence, while Cliff recognized George's unparalleled talent and songwriting genius. In private, they occasionally discussed the challenges of fame, creative decisions, and the pressures of performing for millions. These candid conversations revealed a side of George Harrison that few ever saw: introspective, insightful, and deeply committed to his art. Closes by highlighting the enduring lessons Cliff learned from George. Beyond the music, their interactions were a study in humility, creativity, and integrity. Cliff reflects on how George's approach to fame, his dedication to his craft, and his quiet wisdom influenced his own career choices. Even decades later, Cliff acknowledges that the respect and understanding they shared remain a guiding influence in his life. As fans await Cliff's revelations, it becomes clear that the story of Cliff Richard and George Harrison is not just about celebrity or rivalry. It is about connection, mutual admiration, and the unspoken bonds that can exist between two legendary artists navigating the extraordinary world of music. Beyond the public stage and media speculation, Cliff Richard's memories of George Harrison are deeply personal. At 85, he reflects on moments that few fans have ever heard, moments that reveal not just the musician, but the man behind the legend. These stories are not about fame or competition. They are about friendship, respect, and the subtle bonds that develop between people who share extraordinary lives. Cliff recalls one evening in the early 1970s when they met at a private industry gathering. The room was buzzing with energy, musicians and producers mingling, but George's presence had a calming effect. He had this quiet way of observing everything, noticing the small details, Cliff says. You didn't feel pressured to impress him. He made you feel like what you said mattered. In that environment, Cliff realized that George's genius wasn't just in music. It was in his understanding of people and how to navigate the world around him with grace. One anecdote that Cliff shares highlights George's humor, a side rarely seen in the press. During a recording session, George and Cliff ended up in a playful debate about a chord progression, each insisting on their version. The tension could have been awkward, but instead it became a shared joke, filled with laughter and mutual respect. George could challenge you without making it personal, Cliff explains. He had a way of turning even disagreements into something constructive and fun. That combination of seriousness about music and lightheartedness about life made George unforgettable to those who knew him personally. Cliff also opens up about George's generosity, both with his time and his insights. On multiple occasions, George offered guidance to younger artists, including Cliff, not in a patronizing way, but as a peer sharing wisdom. He never bragged or showed off, Cliff recalls. He just shared what he knew, quietly, sincerely, and it always left you inspired. These gestures, often invisible to the public, shaped Cliff's understanding of collaboration, humility, and the kind of person George was beyond the spotlight. The stories Cliff shares also address misunderstandings that have persisted over decades. Fans sometimes assumed distance or tension between them, fueled by press speculation and the competitive nature of the music industry. Cliff clarifies that much of this was misinterpreted. While they weren't inseparable friends, there was mutual admiration and moments of genuine connection that mattered deeply. "We didn't need to be seen together all the time," Cliff explains. The respect and understanding were always there, and that was enough. Closes by emphasizing the enduring impact George Harrison had on Cliff, both personally and professionally. These private moments, the laughter, debates, and quiet mentorship shaped Cliff's approach to music, fame, and life itself. George's example of combining talent with humility, insight with humor, and genius with kindness left an impression that decades of headlines could never capture. Through these reflections, Cliff Richard offers fans a rare, intimate glimpse of George Harrison, not as a Beatle or global icon, but as a human being whose presence, personality, and wisdom left an indelible mark. These personal stories remind us that even legends have friendships, challenges, and private moments that define them far more than public appearances ever could. At 85, Cliff Richard looks back on a lifetime of music, fame, and friendships with a clarity that only time can bring. Among the most significant of these is his connection to George Harrison. Now, after decades of curiosity, speculation, and unanswered questions, Cliff finally shares the truths that have lingered quietly in his memory. Truths that reveal not just the man George was, but the profound impact he had on Cliff's own life and career. Cliff's on the uniqueness of George's talent, which extended far beyond his role as the Beatle, known for his gentle demeanor and innovative guitar work. George had this rare combination of creativity, humility, and insight, Cliff says. He could see the world differently, hear music differently, and somehow make you feel that your own ideas mattered too. It was this combination that left a lasting impression on Cliff, teaching him that greatness in music and in life wasn't just about fame or accolades, but about integrity, perspective, and genuine connection. Over the years, Cliff has shared anecdotes that reveal George's humor, generosity, and depth. From private backstage conversations to light-hearted debates over music and technique, George's presence was always both grounding and inspiring. Cliff remembers moments of laughter, advice offered without judgment, and simple acts of kindness that were never documented or reported. These memories, Cliff explains, are the truths he wants fans to know, the side of George Harrison that was often hidden behind headlines, public appearances, and the myth of Beatlemai. Cliff also reflects on the emotional dimension of their relationship. While the two were never inseparable companions, there was a profound mutual respect that endured across decades. "We never needed to be in the papers together or appear publicly as close friends," Cliff explains. The respect, understanding, and admiration were always there, quietly, privately. That's what mattered. It's a reminder that meaningful relationships in the music world and in life aren't always about visibility. Sometimes their value lies in subtlety, consistency, and integrity. The also touches on the lessons Cliff learned from observing George's approach to fame and creativity. George's ability to balance public attention with private reflection, to innovate while staying true to his values, and to maintain humility amid global adoration, served as a model for Cliff throughout his career. These lessons shaped not only his musical choices, but also his philosophy on life, relationships, and the pressures of being in the spotlight. As Cliff recounts these experiences, it becomes clear that sharing them now at 85 is about more than nostalgia. It's about preserving George Harrison's legacy in its truest form beyond tabloids and rumors, and offering fans a personal perspective that honors the man behind the music. Cliff's reflections reveal that admiration, respect, and even quiet friendship can transcend fame, time, and distance, leaving an enduring mark on those who experience it firsthand. Closes with Cliff expressing gratitude for George, for their shared moments, and for the ability to finally tell the truth. These revelations are not sensational. They are human, heartfelt, and illuminating. They remind fans that even icons have private lives filled with complexity, humor, and warmth, and that the bonds forged through music and mutual respect can last a lifetime. Ultimately, Cliff Richard's reflections at 85 offer a rare gift, an honest, intimate view of George Harrison, the truths behind the headlines, and the legacy of a friendship and respect that endured quietly but profoundly. For fans of both artists, it's a final in a story of music admiration and personal truth that continues to resonate decades later.